The Legend of Zelda, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks are often referred to as two of the best Zelda games, to absolutely no one. See, I don't really think many people have really played the DS Zelda games, or even have a grasp of what they're about. And because of that, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks are kind of left in ambiguity as to what they actually are and how good they actually are. Most people accept these two games as some of the bottom tier Zelda games, but I might as well be fair and look at them from a different perspective and see how they hold up. Of course, this being a double review, let's start with The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, released in 2007. And up to this point, there had really only been 3 Zelda games on handhelds: the Oracle games, Link's Awakening, and the Minish Cap, all of which had major button limitations, as all of those consoles only had 2 face buttons, and the Minish Cap didn't really use the L and R button to all of its potential. However, I mean, given the benefit of the doubt, it's definitely Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks' time to have full button mapping on their respective handhelds. No, instead, these entire games are built around the stylus of the DS, which of course was a major gimmick when it released. But, I mean, to be honest, the DS just doesn't really work the best in this way. Trust me, I love the touchscreen for the DS for so many different mini-games and other things that you can use it for in games. However, I felt like they used it maybe a little bit too much during this time period, and that is definitely apparent with these games. Now, I wouldn't say that the stylus is the only thing that ruins these games for me. I mean, having to control Link, his sword movements, and just everything with the stylus isn't my favorite thing in the world, but it definitely could be worse. You eventually get used to it as time goes on, but I really would prefer the more traditional style with how you move around Link, especially given that this is a top-down perspective, meaning the D-pad would work just fine in this scenario. And like I said, the stylus controls aren't the worst thing in the world, but definitely the biggest critique of Phantom Hourglass is the Temple of the Ocean King, which is a reoccurring dungeon that you have to go to over and over and over again. A dungeon built around some of the worst stealth of any DS game I have ever played. It just isn't fun to go through, and just having to sneak around makes you feel less powerful. And then go back into the overworld, go try and find something, and Phantom Hourglass's mini dungeons almost. They don't really feel like full dungeons, and while they technically are, they're significantly shorter than most dungeons in other Zelda games. And then go back to the Temple of the Ocean King and repeat the process. Rinse and repeat until eventually the game's over. And while all of this is happening, the story is kind of weird in this one. The story in Phantom Hourglass is mostly that you just have to rescue Tetra after she's kidnapped by the ghost ship. And then you find out later that her life force is drained, so now you have to get that back through another character who turns out to be the Ocean King. And then eventually you have to go all the way through the dungeon just to defeat the boss, which should restore the life force into Tetra. And then apparently at the end of the game, it was all a dream, except for it wasn't all a dream. Yeah, I really have no idea how to explain the plot of this game because it's so convoluted. And the plot doesn't really seem to be the only problem here, but also that some of the characters sort of fall flat. I really like Linebeck as a character, especially given his pride in trying to find this great treasure, and how he kind of redeems himself at the end, but the other characters were kind of forgettable to me. I mean, the fairy and the eventual Ocean King just aren't really memorable characters, and Tetra's barely even in the game. So yeah, you're kind of just exploring as Link for most of this game, and while Lineback's a cool character, that's really all that you get to meet. And when you compare this to something like Wind Waker, which is supposed to be set in a similar world to this one, that had so many memorable and fun characters all throughout the game. This one, not so much. And honestly, I feel kind of bad being this harsh on Phantom Hourglass, especially given that it's not like that bad of a game, but when you compare it to the rest of the franchise, it definitely shows some serious pains. And I just prefer the traditional control set a lot more. I prefer the gameplay of other Zeldas a lot more, and the story not really being great, and also the ideas for gameplay are just kind of taking the uniqueness of Wind Waker and just pouring them into a more generic Zelda game. This one didn't really do it for me, which is why I'm going to give Phantom Hourglass, and remember these scores are compared to other Zelda games, a 5 out of 10. After the lukewarm reception of The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, Nintendo decided to give it a sequel in the realm of The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. And while there is no Zelda game that really is the most hated, I will say that this is a lot of people's least favorite. And if we're not counting Triforce Heroes, I think this is probably my least favorite as well. Spirit Tracks just does so much wrong that it's hard to really appreciate what it does right. So let's explain what I don't like about The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. To begin, I guess I'll start by saying some positive things about the game. I like the ideas that they try to implement into this one. While the train travel is kind of annoying and I don't really like it, the idea behind it isn't the worst thing in the world. I also feel like the slickness of the menu is a lot better than what was used in Phantom Hourglass. Not much of a compliment, but I mean, it looks a little bit nicer and feels a little bit cleaner. Also, I do like that they try and be a little bit more original with the villain. Phantom Hourglass did this as well, but Spirit Tracks tries to do something way more creative. This is definitely a little ambitious for a Zelda story-wise, but I don't really think it works all the time. Also, trying to move around both Link and Zelda in theory sounds like an interesting concept. I know a lot of people were thinking about this for Tears of the Kingdom, but in practice, this was not very fun at all in the game. And while Spirit Zelda is definitely an interesting companion to have, it just doesn't work if you ask me. And that is a major problem, because when one of the core gameplay mechanics that is supposed to make this one unique isn't fun, it kind of makes me question this game more than I should. Also, this game is incredibly generic, and I know I complained about that in my review for Phantom Hourglass just a few minutes ago, but also with Spirit Tracks, a lot of the dungeon themes are just reused from past Zelda games, and it's your typical forest dungeon, fire dungeon, everything you can imagine. And because of that, it makes this game just feel less unique. There's nothing that really shouts out to me as, wow, that's a new idea from Spirit Tracks, other than, I guess, Spirit Zelda. And the Spirit Tower is a slightly better but also worse version of the Temple of the Ocean King. Both of these DS games have a lot of the same problems, and I feel like my biggest critique of Spirit Tracks is that it doesn't fix what was already broken within Phantom Hourglass. Instead, it just makes things worse in some scenarios, and I just really don't like this. And, well, I will admit that Spirit Tracks isn't like the worst game that I've ever played or anything close to that. It just didn't leave much of an impression on me. Once I was done, I was done. And for both of these DS games, I don't really plan on playing them again anytime soon. So, while neither of these games were technically bad, comparing them to the rest of the series, they were definitely rough. Which is why I'm going to give The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks an unfortunate 4 out of 10.